congratulations. Thank you, Barry Sullivan. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Leader. And we all know that it's no secret that in this House there are often great divisions. And probably the most profound schism that exists in this House is between Red Sox fans and Yankee fans. But to show you the esteem that Mr. Sullivan has held with our members, I have the privilege of yielding whatever time he may consume to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Serrano.
I thank the gentleman, and you are correct. You used up my my first line. I live a few blocks away from Yankee Stadium, and so for a Yankee fan to honor a Red Sox fan shows the kind of love and respect that I have for him. I don't know if I'll survive or be able to sleep tonight, but I will say congratulations, Barry, on the Red Sox winning the World Series. You notice that didn't come out too well, but it's not that easy. Barry Sullivan, when I first came here and I found out that Barry Sullivan was running the cloakroom, I expected to see Barry Sullivan, the movie star of the 1940s and the black and white movies. Instead, I found a class act and a person who really cared about the membership. And that's what's important, that he always took care of the membership. And one of the things that always amazed me about Barry was his ability to put up with us. After all, how many times does a person get to answer the same question 200 times in a row to the same people? When are we getting out tonight, Barry? When do you think votes will end? Do I have time to go to dinner? Well, Mr. Serrano, blah, 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 blah. And he would do it. And then you would show up, and you would show up, and he would do it. By the third time, I would have told everybody to come in the cloakroom, and I'll make one, one speech to everybody, and then you can all get out of here and leave me alone. But there was always that ability for him to understand the needs we had, the information we needed, and the fact that he provided that for us. But he also had a sense of humor. I gave him a hard time for so long. I've been here 23 years, and I had running lines with him. One of them, walking to the cloakroom, was, are the Red Sox still in the league? That was one of the ones. The other one was, what's the loudest noise in September? And he would actually go on with it and say, what? And I'd say, the Red Sox falling apart. And this was on and on and on. But through it all, Barry, you showed more than just being a sports fan. You showed that you were a class human being, that you were a person who cared, for a person who cared in terms of how we got here. I think you, as much as anyone else, understood that none of us get appointed here, that we have to go beg in front of a Legion Hall or in front of a subway station or in front of a supermarket for a vote, and you understood that, and that's how you treated us, and that's how I think how we treated you. You were the ones who told us if there were peanuts coming to that basket in front of you when we were looking for peanuts or chocolate or whatever. You were the person who made sure everything ran well. And I'm going to miss you. I'm really going to miss you because I think you're one of the classiest acts around here. I hope you stay in touch. And I will just end this way. We have in Spanish, and I will apologize to the stenographer and I'll translate it later. We have a saying in Spanish, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. Tell me who you walk with, and I'll tell you who you are. We walk with you. We are you. Let's hope that we have learned from you how to be as classy and as humane as you have been for so many years. Thank you, Barry.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield now to the member who, I guess, will represent Barry in different ways, possibly officially at some point. Gentleman from Massachusetts who represents the town of Falmouth.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the kind words of the gentleman from New York, I just want to say, after hearing him pay tribute to Mr. Sullivan, I just will tell you that I do hope that the Yankees do sign Robinson Cano. And I hope they go way over the luxury tax threshold to do it. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just briefly, I want to tell you, when I came to this House, not knowing much, I asked for advice from a lot of people, and I can't tell you how many people told me, just seek out Barry Sullivan for whatever you need, whether it's a personal need, whether it's a knowledge of the city, whether it's a knowledge of legislative practice, whether it's a knowledge of what to do in the formal or informal structure. They all told me to seek out Barry Sullivan, and I'll tell you that no better advice was ever given to me. I want to congratulate him on his 33 years, and I want to say that it's been an amazing career because as leadership has changed over his 87 years, he's maintained that position despite who was in the Democratic leadership, and that's a tribute to the job that he does. I also have felt a kinship with him as I began to know a little bit about him. I saw there was a lot in common. He comes from a police family. His father was police commissioner. My father was a police officer. My brother was a police officer. And his father was a state senator, and I served in the state senate in time, and part of that time representing the city of Boston as well. We both shared the great privilege of having a mentor. Joe Moakley was a congressman in my district in my days when I was in the state legislature, and I called upon him time and time again for advice. And I realized that both Barry Sullivan and I profited greatly from that knowledge, not only of the institutional knowledge that he had, but the good character and type of person that Joe Moakley was. Barry and I both had an early interest in politics. We both studied and majored in political science when we were in college, and even our own sons went to the same college of St. Joe's, and we both paid those tuition figures to have that occur. A lot of people will be saying goodbye to Barry, and they'll be saying that they are sorry they won't be seeing him as much. I think I'm probably in the minority where I'll be able to say I probably will see you more because I'm sure that as he has more time to spend on his own, to recreate, to be with his family, I'm going to see him on the beaches in Falmouth Heights. I'm going to see him fishing. I'm going to see him watching the Falmouth Commodores in the Cape Cod League and enjoying probably one of the best places in the world to retire to. I just want to wish him well and wish Barbara well, good health, enjoy those years, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for a job well done. I yield back. Thank you.
Speaker, I'd like to recognize another gentleman with a special relationship with Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Andrews from New Jersey.
I thank my friend for yielding, and I, with a sense of real mixed emotions, joined this discussion tonight. Certainly with gratitude and pride for Barry's 33 years of service, but for a real sense of regret that he will not be a part of our everyday lives and work the way he has been for all these years. The House is very often a very chaotic and noisy place. The bell rings and hundreds of people descend upon the floor. They all have their demands. They all have their ideas. They all have their needs. And in that sea of chaos, you look for a person who stands tall and strong and is unflappable no matter what. Barry, for all of us, for all those years, you have been one of those people. Nothing flusters Barry Sullivan. There is no problem too great. There is no controversy too bitter. He is always the same optimistic, friendly, honest, cheerful, strong person, no matter what. And your strength has been an inspiration to all of us. When you know from whence Barry comes, his strength is easy to understand. I did not have the privilege of sharing the heritage he has from Boston, but I know his family very, very well. I know that his beloved father-in-law, former Representative Bill Hughes, Ambassador Bill Hughes, served here, and perhaps his greatest gift was Barbara. I think that's probably the reason Barry stayed in Washington, because he met her and that they started a beautiful life together. their 3 wonderful sons, whom they've educated and raised, and I have the privilege of working with his son, Brendan, who's here with us tonight, representing the people of our 1st Congressional District in New Jersey. So, Barry, nothing you do surprises us because of your inner strength and your qualities and your optimism. The one thing about Barry that did surprise me, however, was that he did not start growing his beard in the middle of the summer and let it go to the end of the World Series like his beloved Red Sox. There was some discussion he might do that. But I do admire the fact that he was nice to everyone, even the Yankees fans, as Mr. Serrano just said. He showed real equanimity in that. Barry, on behalf of our country, our party, my constituents, and my family, we thank you for your strength and your goodness and your inspiration. We know we will see you many times in the future. We wish you Godspeed and congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Thank you. Barry, we're going to miss you. Everyone's been rightly singing your praises. I'll tell you a couple of things that I noticed right away. When I came, it was '07. Many of the members who've spoken have been here many years longer. And when you went into the cloakroom, you were treated like you'd been here forever. Everybody was treated the same. And the goodwill, the good sense of humor, the good judgment, the sense that we're all part of something larger than ourselves, that was something that Barry really conveyed. But the other thing I noticed, we used to have pages here. Remember that? We had these young people full of hopes and dreams about how they could make a contribution in this country, how they could make this a better country, how they could be better people. Barry, it was amazing to watch you with those kids, because you had to get them organized. They had to learn all of our names. They'd be sitting there in the cloakroom studying the Facebook. And these young kids from all over the country would be coming up and they'd be saying hi to Mr. Miller, to Mr. Welch, to Mr. Capuano. And it was such a reassuring observation, such a wonderful scene there, where these kids, boys and girls, felt that they had a big job in a big institution. You could see them getting excited about public service, and you could see them taking seriously the responsibilities that go along with it, which at that moment for them was learning the names and matching them to the faces of the people who were here. And Barry, you were a great teacher, and it wasn't just that they got our names right. It was that you inspired them to find in themselves the discipline and the strength to take that next step and to aspire to achieve their dreams. So, you know, it's a life well lived when you can treat the people in it with love and respect, when you can commit yourself to the building of an institution that you can help leave behind in a better shape than you found it. So, Barry, for all of us who served with you and seen all the good deeds you've done for so many, thank you very much. I yield back.
Speaker, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Higgins.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Also, I want to say that as a freshman member here several years ago, Barry made me feel very special. And I thought that, you know, it had to do with the fact that I was from a place called South Buffalo, which is very much like South Boston, but without the edge or the accent. But this favorite son of South Boston defined this institution with a sense of order, most certainly, but a sense of pride and purpose and humor as well. An avid Boston Red Sox fan and Boston Bruins fan, and just an all-around wonderful person that made everybody here, hundreds of members that have served, feel very special, as you did that first day that I arrived. So, Barry, I thank you as a member of this House, and I want to commend you for your years of service and wish you well in the years ahead of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. I'd like to yield to the gentleman from California, Mr. Miller.
Thank the gentleman for yielding, and thank you for organizing this tribute to Barry, and I think to his family, because we know the time he gives away from them on our behalf for his service here. I'm one of the few people that say I was here before you were, Barry. But I thought everybody here was from Boston or something like that when I got here from the West Coast. But I want to join my colleagues here. I think we all have a very strong and deep feeling about the service you rendered to us. Sometimes when we were pleasant and sometimes when we weren't so pleasant, sometimes when we were harried and sometimes when we were relaxed. You always seemed to be very stable in terms of the answers that you could provide us, even when you couldn't possibly know the answer to the question, when are we getting out? And you just would kind of look and say, well, and you'd give it your best guesstimate because you didn't have a clue what was going to take place on the floor given the turmoil that happens from time to time. But it was more than just about getting out. I think it was also an assessment, your sense of what was really taking place on the floor. Yes, there were 50 amendments filed, but you had a handicap system. You figured 30 were going to go by the wayside by noon. Another 5 would drop out later. You heard that somebody else might have been leaving, so now we're down to a handful of manageable amendments, so don't give up your early reservation. That kind of handicapping was worth a lot when you come from the West Coast and you got to do it every week. So thank you for that. But your service here overall to us, the dignity with which you've treated the members of Congress, as I say, sometimes when we can be rather demanding because we're harried. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful relationship to have you on our side in our cloakroom, taking care of us and answering questions from our families when they call and want to know what might they expect in terms of our service and our time here. I think Joe Moakley picked a good guy, and he did right by you, and you did right by us, and I just want to thank you. I want to join Mr. Welch also. I was a big fan of the experience that the pages were able to garner here, and all of us have met people who were pages who now live in our districts and remember that experience, or it was key to their actions. It was unfortunate that we weren't able to hold on to that program, but your management, your care, and your kind remark to them sometimes when they were being youthful and exuberant about something that might be taking place to remind them what was going on in the House, I think was one of the lessons of their lives that they will never forget. So thank you very much for that management and oversight of those young people who have gone on in so many instances to make major contributions in our communities and in our country. So thank you so much for your service. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Ryan.
I want to thank the gentleman. Barry, I just want to say that there's been a lot of kind words here tonight, and I think a lot of the words are very appropriate. But I got to say, I don't even like you. You're full of bad news all the time. We want to go home, you won't let us. We want to come in later, you won't let us. We want to go home a day early, you won't let us. Barbara, I don't know how you put up with them. As a young boy, I used to go to church with my grandfather, and he was an usher at the church. He wasn't the priest, he wasn't the head of parish council, but he was the guy who made everything run. You know, he helped run the festival, he was the top usher, so he had to handle all the money, he scheduled everybody, and I grew up really watching him as an appreciation of how many people that you may not see in that instance on the altar or here on speaking on the floor, how many people work to make things happen. And Barry is in that cloakroom making things happen, making things run smoothly, not in the newspaper, not getting the headlines. And I just want to say thanks. I worked for a member of Congress 20 years ago, and he had the old things you used to have to slide on. It was like, you know, it was huge, it seemed like back then. And I remember as a staffer hearing Barry's voice, and I know it was Barry. I just heard this voice, you know, 2 bells, 3 bells, 4 bells, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. And for 2 years I would hear that. And then when I finally became a member and I got my little clip and I started hearing that voice and I got to meet Barry, it was like I thought I made it. I'm like, how I get to respond to what Barry has been telling people to do for so many years, and it was a great honor. And then when then Minority Leader Pelosi had us started the 30-something working group, and Kendrick Meek and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and other members and I would come to the floor sometimes 2 or 3 nights during the week and stay very late, sometimes 10, 11, and I know Barry was here slogging away. He's like, "You going to go tonight, Mr. Ryan?" Like, "Yeah, sorry, Bear." And he would sit in that room and wait till we were done. But that's the kind of dedication that you've had, and we love you, and you're the best, always with a smile and something nice to say, no matter how bad the situation got or how tough things were. So, Barbara, thank you. I know there's a lot of late nights here, and Barry, you're the best. Have a great retirement.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from South Boston, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank my friend, Mr. Capuano, for reserving this time on our behalf to recognize our great friend. Mr. Speaker, Barry Sullivan has been here a long time. I know that the title cloakroom manager has a rather antiquated sound to it. Matter of fact, there is a rumor around here that Barry Sullivan actually was the manager of the cloakroom back when they still wore cloaks. I'm not sure he's been here that long, but I do know the beginning of his service started with marching in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in South Boston with Joe Moakley, our dear friend, dear departed friend. And now, after 33 years, our friend has decided to retire from his position, and it is a truly bittersweet moment, I think, for a lot of us. Barry has been an extension of our staffs. I will miss the daily contact that I have with Barry, because most of the time he's reminding me to vote and make sure that I make all the votes, but he's also an extension of our families in many ways. So many of us travel back and forth from our home districts to mine in South Boston and around the city of Boston, back here to Washington, and Barry's an extension of that. I've had the good fortune to call Barry my friend since the day I arrived here in Washington, D.C. Shortly after the attacks on September 11th. I came in a special election and came in basically as the only Democrat elected at that time. And I was given one bit of advice by my friends, and they said, make sure you get to know Barry Sullivan in the cloakroom. And that is some of the best advice that I've ever received in coming here. Barry has, he may not know it, but to a new member of Congress, his assistance is immeasurable, especially when you're just first getting used to understand the rhythm here in Washington, D.C., and the importance of the whole process here. Barry has been in D.C. all these years now, at least 33 years, but he's never lost his connection to his hometown of South Boston. Matter of fact, Barry may not know this, but Barry is actually still voting in South Boston each and every election. There's an old South Boston rule that if someone moves away, or even if they pass away, as long as you know how that person would have voted, you're allowed to vote on their behalf. I'm actually kidding on that, but Barry has never lost his connection to his local community in South Boston, as well as his love for Cape Cod. A true son of South Boston, Barry and his family still make their annual trip to Falmouth, Massachusetts, and of course always stopping at Sullivan's at Castle Island for a couple of hot dogs. While there's no doubt that Barry loves to get back to the Cape, there was always the rumor that Barry traveled back home simply to work on his Boston accent. While I may have had trouble when I first got here talking to some of our colleagues from the Deep South, I never needed an interpreter to talk to my friend Barry. I still remember how proud we were back in 2007 when, standing right in this chamber, in this aisle, at the State of the Union address, it was Barry Sullivan who made the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. And while most of the country didn't know what he was saying, a lot of the people back in South Boston and in our district were very, very proud of that moment. The phone was ringing off the hook. And, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of members here who are the face of the Congress. We're up here at the microphone all the time on a continual basis, much to the chagrin of the people that we represent sometimes. But behind the scenes, it's really people like Barry Sullivan who make things work. And his manner, his respectful way of dealing with everyone, whether it's a page, whether it's the Speaker of the House, whether it's a Democrat, he's even nice to the Republicans. And I think it helps the decor, the camaraderie, the way this body works. I think it goes beyond what people would rightfully expect, that Barry conducted his job with that level of respect and dignity and efficiency in guiding us in our jobs and in our responsibilities. On a personal level, I'm proud to call Barry a friend, and I've also come to know his wife Barbara, St. Barbara we call her, and his sons Barry, Brendan, and Brian. We do regret that he's decided to move on to other endeavors, but we just want to say that the job that you have done here, Barry, the dignity, the professionalism that you have lent to this Congress and to your country is something that we are enormously proud of. I cannot think of a better compliment and recognition of a job well done. You have been a blessing. You have been a blessing to this Congress, to both sides of the aisle, and to this institution and to your country. So, Barry, we all wish you well in your future endeavors. We wish the best for Barbara and your sons and your family. And I thank you for all of your kindness you have shown towards me and towards all the other members here and their families during our times in this Congress. God bless you and thank you. Godspeed.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pasquale.
Mr. Speaker, Michael, thank you for putting us together tonight. I come tonight not only to talk about Barry, but to talk about all the staff. So, please understand what I am saying tonight. If you feel that there is an injection in my words of politic, so be it. First of all, I never understood what Barry said any time. So it's not a question of having a translation. Thank you for your service to your country. And thank you for your service to this Congress. Every congressperson. The entire membership has been so fortunate to have you here. And you know what I mean when I say, Barry, location, location, location. You were right, you fit, and you did what you said you were going to do. I do not speak to you in terms of your title, because titles come and go. No, I speak to you, to your character. You are a person of character. Your word is always your bond. We joked, we kibitzed back and forth. We joked about sports, we joked about life. But you are an example for all of us that you move forward. And you may be on, as someone might say, the downside of the mountain, but you're really not. You're really not. I say this to all the staff members. I've been here for close to 17 years. And Barry, you're leaving at a time of most interest to me, since I always made it a habit when I was a teacher, or whether I was in the mayor's office, whatever, to talk to everybody, the secretary, the administrator, the young lady on the elevator, the maintenance man, the guy who took care of the boiler, the guy who used to tell when I was the mayor, when in the middle of the winter the temperature in the council chambers was 80 degrees, and I'd tell him to go down and stoke the fire and make it so hot so we get the meeting over with. You got to know who to talk to. You don't talk to the mayor. You don't talk to the superintendent of the schools. You don't talk to the speaker. You talk to the Barrys of this world that make the place run. And if you don't learn that, then you're in for a sad awakening when you get here. Public servants have been maligned in this very institution. Public servants have not been appreciated. And I want to speak, and I've done many times on this floor, Barry, spoken for. I mean, public servants can speak for themselves, and I guess I'm a public servant too. But the disrespect shown with a pat on the back and then a spit in your eye, that doesn't belong here. Because if we're really grateful for what you do, Mr. Barry, Mr. Police Officer, Mr. Firefighter, Mr. Teacher, Mr. Congressman, if we really appreciate it, we're straight with you. We respect you. We want to make sure you get fair compensation for your pay so you don't have to feel like you have your hat out. You have raised this institution. You have made it a better place. All of you. So, Mr. Speaker, go back to those who aren't here right now and tell them, when we lose the appreciation for the staff people who service every day, who service our country every day, we are the worse for it, not the better. So, Barry, I've never heard an evil word spoken about you, because there was nothing to say of negativity, anything to say. Thank you for who you are. I hope I see you again. And you've made an impression on all of us. God bless you. God bless your beautiful family. God bless America. Thank you. You're back.
Thank you, Mr. Pasquale. Barry, I wanted to save this till last because, honestly, stuff about life is just stuff. And it's all interesting. You had an interesting life. Great. For me, I wanted to do this because I consider you a friend. And I don't make friends that easily. I make a lot of acquaintances. I don't consider a lot of people close friends. To me, friendship is based on whether I think somebody will go through the fire for me like I would go through the fire for them. My judgment on you is that you would. It has a lot to do with the way you were raised, and I don't know much about it, but I do. When you were raised in South Boston, I was being raised in Somerville. There was only one place in the world tougher than South Boston at that time, and that was Somerville. And I will tell you that an awful lot of people come out of those situations bitter, with a lot of difficulties, not knowing what to do, and angry at the world. A lot of good people come out of it, though, just the opposite. Understanding, okay, life can be tough, life isn't fair. Make the best of it you can. It's better to go through life with a smile, take yourself a little less seriously, than it is to be bitter. And you've done that. You've done it with grace. And to me, that means an awful lot. I will tell you that, it was always comforting for me to hear the voice on the machine. I think it's a joke. I think it's hilarious. I've actually enjoyed having to catch you up on your proper pronunciation of words. I love the fact that your friends at home called you and told you that the word speaker isn't spoken the way you've got it. It's been twisted after all these years. You've got to get it right, get back up into Boston and get it straight. I think that's great. But I will tell you that for me, the relationship started before I even knew it at St. John's Prep. You're the only person I know that went there besides me. The only difference between you and me is you finished it, I got kicked out. But in those days, and I have no idea, I never asked why you were there. I know why I was there. I was there to be plucked out of a difficult situation with the hope that things go a different way. Well, of course, you couldn't take the Somerville out of me, and didn't quite work out the way my parents had thought it might. The Zavarian brothers mostly were from Somerville at the time, and their beatings were nothing to me, just natural life. But to me, that tells me something. You had it right from the beginning. You had a good upbringing. You treat people with respect. You understand the needs of the members here, and you treat us like human beings. To me, that's more important than anything else. And for me, that friendship doesn't go away. I hate the fact that you're retiring. I hate it. And I hate it because I don't take change too well. I like certain stable things in my life. I love Stevie Lynch, but I hate the fact that Joe Moakley's not with us anymore. I know that life changes. And I know and I hope to God that you have a great retirement. I hope you enjoy yourself. I hope you learn to say your wife's name properly. My wife is also a Barbara. And there is no Oz in there. You don't need that letter. It's an extra letter. Just get rid of it. I hope you have a great retirement. I hope you realize that you're always, always, always going to have friends here. And I don't care where I am or where you are. If there's ever anything I can do to help you or your family or anything I can do to ever help, I don't even have to say it because I know you know it. It's what we do. It's what we enjoy doing. You're my friend. I don't come to this well very often, as you well know. It's a unique experience for me. I think most of what is said here is insincere and read off papers. I just want to take a minute to sincerely tell you that I've enjoyed our relationship. I consider you a good friend, and I wish you the best of life, wherever you go, whatever you do. And it's been a joy working with you, and I am proud of the fact that I can call you a friend. Thank you for your service, Barry. Thank you for your friendship. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Massachusetts yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Larry Woods, a constituent of mine from Winston-Salem, is accomplishing groundbreaking work and service to local North Carolinians. Under Larry's leadership, the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem is transforming the template for North Carolina's housing programs through a program called PATH, or Projects for Assistance in the Transition from Homelessness. Through PATH, the Housing Authority works with community groups in service to families and individuals who are proactively seeking to reduce and eventually end their dependence on government support. PATH's community collaborations provide specialized job skills, education, employment preparation, and career placement services to equip families as they turn their dreams into reality. The PATH concept, championed by Larry Woods and his team, has capitalized on community resources, eliminated duplication and gaps in service, and reduced service costs. Participants in the PATH program soon will also be able to benefit from access to special step-up housing at the Housing Authority's new modern facilities. In the near future, some individuals working to improve their lives through PATH will be able to move into the Oaks, a new 50-unit development located in Winston-Salem. The Oaks will feature a variety of apartments to fit residents' unique needs and provide a valuable incentive for participants as they move forward in their personal journey towards self-sufficiency. An open house was recently held at the Oaks, where 2 completed units were shown to the public, and I'd like to congratulate all involved on that accomplishment. Larry and his team's forward-thinking approach to public housing has changed the lives of many North Carolinians. The PATH program is just one component of their efforts to advance their mission of direct service in a fiscally responsible way. Communities throughout our country looking to overcome the challenge of homelessness can find new ideas to meet the needs of their citizens by looking to the great example of Winston-Salem's PATH program. Mr. Speaker, community spirit is alive and well in North Carolina's 5th District. The Forbush High School Band Boosters are creatively working toward the goal of replacing decade-old band uniforms and equipment. Booster volunteers have been fundraising for this project for years because the $30,000 price tag goes well beyond a single-year budget. In their effort, they reached out to Dewey's Bakery in Winston-Salem, and the two have teamed to open a special Dewey's fundraising store in Yadkinville, North Carolina, much like fundraising stores operating for other schools in Clemens and Boone. Mr. and Mrs. Clate and Josie Wingler of Yadkinville graciously donated a storefront, and right now band boosters are there selling wonderful Dewey's products, as they will until Christmas. The entire Yadkinville store is run by volunteers, band members, parents, grandparents, and community supporters. And more than 1/3 of the store's profits will go directly to the Forbush High School Band. This level of teamwork, spirit of volunteerism, generosity, and commitment to local communities is a testament to the wonderful people living in the 5th District. Mr. Speaker, National Industries for the Blind celebrates its 75th anniversary this year, and I congratulate NIB on this achievement. The work NIB, its team members, and affiliates do every day in service to blind and visually impaired Americans is deserving of national attention and thanks. NIB teams with 91 associated nonprofit agencies to extend opportunities for economic and personal independence to men and women throughout America who are blind. NIB goes about this goal primarily by connecting visually impaired individuals with good jobs, jobs they can be proud of. In my home state, Winston-Salem Industries for the Blind has worked on behalf of visually impaired North Carolinians since 1936. Last year, under the leadership of Executive Director David Horton and Executive Chairman Dan Boucher, Industries for the Blind connected 309 local residents with fulfilling job opportunities at manufacturing facilities in Winston and Asheville. As a visually impaired person myself, I have great appreciation for NIB's commitment to help those with severe sight challenges acquire what Winston-Salem Industries for the Blind describes as the, quote, confidence and independence to contribute to society and fulfill personal dreams of having a job, end quote. To the folks at NIB and local industries throughout the country, congratulations on 75 years of faithful service and best wishes for many more years to come. Mr. Speaker, the prayers of the American people remain with Filipino people as they struggle to recover in the wake of Typhoon Haiyan. Haiyan claimed thousands of lives, displaced millions, and left widespread devastation throughout the Philippine Islands. The gravity of the crisis is heartbreaking. The United States and many international aid organizations have been quick to help our friends in the Philippines. Samaritan's Purse, an international Christian relief organization headquartered in Boone, North Carolina, is among them. Members of the Samaritan's Purse Disaster Assistance Response Team are on the ground in the Philippines right now, providing medical support and basic survival supplies such as food and hygiene kits, temporary shelter items, and clean drinking water. As part of the international response team, Samaritan's Purse is living out its mission to provide, quote, spiritual and physical aid to hurting people around the world, end quote. Its team members on the ground are also obeying vividly the biblical directive to practice faith by visiting orphans and widows in the midst of their distress. Knowing full well the enormity of the struggle and depth of pain before them, we commit to keep a prayerful vigil for the Samaritan's Purse team in the Philippines, United States aid workers, and their international partners, and for the millions whose lives have been changed by the tragedy of Haiyan. Mr. Speaker, with the recent honoring of our nation's venerable veterans, it is appropriate to mention a group of my constituents who have accepted an ongoing mission to help our military heroes and their families. Started 3 years ago by ex-Marine Mike Beasley, the Fallen Heroes Ministry operates out of Sandy Ridge Baptist Church in Hickory, North Carolina. The ministry has spread its influence across the state and even the nation by honoring families that have experienced the tragic loss of a family member in combat. Through this noble undertaking, members of the Fallen Heroes Ministry have reached out to many families that have experienced the loss of a loved one in Iraq or Afghanistan, and even a family in Hickory who lost a son long ago in Vietnam. The Fallen Heroes Ministry serves as a reminder to congregations nationwide to remain engaged in service to America's heroes and their families, since the loss of American soldiers brings real heartbreak to communities back home. The Fallen Heroes Ministry abides by a noble vision, striving to bring together families of our fallen with the support of home communities to foster an environment to help with their collective healing process. Their work is deserving of praise, and their calling in service to our heroes and their loved ones shows just a bit of the spirit that sets America apart in the world. I've got one more, George, about a minute. Mr. Speaker, the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce recently recognized the late Charles Church of Valley Crucis as the recipient of the 2013 Tuckwiller Award for Community Development. What a way to honor his legacy, for Charles could not be more deserving. He was a farmer, a teacher, a visionary, and a friend to folks well beyond Watauga. Charles was instrumental in building Watauga's local organic farming community and is known for establishing a broad food network in the Boone area. Charles understood the interdependency of the farm and city. He valued cooperation above competition and possessed the spirit of innovation that has always characterized great North Carolinians. A successful farmer, Charles selflessly mentored both young and experienced growers. His pioneering ideas and dedicated spirit continued to guide many throughout our community. Without his vision, energy, and dedication, organic farming and the entire locally grown food network in Watauga wouldn't be what it is today. The Tuckwiller Award remembers Charles as a kind, generous, and tireless advocate for farmers, and above all, an honored member of our North Carolina community. And though the community still very much misses his presence and his counsel, the example set by Charles Church, ever the optimist, continues to inspire. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time.
The lady yields the balance of her time. According to the Speaker's announced policy, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, will be administered 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just returned from visiting with hardworking Americans down on the National Mall, including Tom Weiss from Colorado, who are camped out and fasting in front of the Capitol on the National Mall. It's called the Fast for Families, a call for immigration reform and a pathway to citizenship. And fasting this month are many fine Americans using their own suffering to send a clear message to us here in Washington, to their elected leaders, that the moral and economic toll of Congress's failure to pass immigration reform is simply too great. This is an economic cause, yes, a security cause, yes, but it is a moral cause to unite families, to allow people to give back to our country, to make it greater. Men and women from all corners of the country are pleading with us to pass comprehensive immigration reform. H.R. 15 here in the House reduces the deficit by close to $200 billion, creates over 100,000 jobs for Americans, secures our borders, unites families, makes sure that we have people with the skills we need to build a 21st century economy. And all that it requires is action here on the floor of the House. There are many others in states including Arizona, Nebraska, California, New York, and Pennsylvania who are also fasting and depriving themselves of food to demonstrate their passion for fixing our broken immigration system. I want to share with you the words of Jesus Ramirez, a 16-year-old high school student from Indianapolis whose parents brought him to the United States when he was just 7 years old to escape the violence that was gripping his home country of Mexico. He says, quote, "My family and 11 million families out there who are undocumented are living in the shadows and living with the fear that one day they will come home and not see a loved one," end quote. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, every day until Congress acts, Jesus' worst fears come true for the 1,100 men, women, and children who are forcibly deported from the United States because our broken immigration system provides no recourse, provides no way under current law to get right with the law, no remedy, no line to get in for people for whom we say, get in line. Immigration reform is about creating that line, and the people who are here illegally will go to the end of the line, behind people who are in process under our current immigration system. Clara Cuesta of Philadelphia, who's also fasting, said that she has friends who deal with hostile and exploitive conditions in the workplace but are afraid to report it or to change jobs because they're worried about being asked to produce documents that they don't have and, again, have no way to get under current law. According to Clara, she has friends that are yelled at and treated less than equal simply because there's no way for them to get right with the law. There are women across our country, Mr. Speaker, who are victims of domestic abuse but don't seek the help they desperately need from authorities because they fear the risk of deportation from those very same authorities that should be there to protect them from harm. Since 1994, there's been more than 6,000 reported deaths on the U.S.-Mexico border. Comprehensive immigration reform will finally secure our southern border. Let's heed the call of the fasters, of those who pray passionately for comprehensive immigration reform. As Reverend Jim Wallace, the president of Sojourners, said, quote, "For people of faith, this is not a political issue but a moral one. And for Christians, how we treat 11 million undocumented people, the strangers among us, is how we treat Christ himself," end quote. Sad to report, Mr. Speaker, it's been 145 days since the bipartisan Senate immigration bill passed with 2/3 of the Senate. And it's rare, Mr. Speaker, here in my time serving in this body that the 2/3 of the Senate can agree on anything. But to agree on something of the importance of immigration reform, more than 2/3 of the Senate, sends a message that our friends on the other side of this building have heard the call of the people of this country to restore the rule of law, have heard the call of law enforcement to get real and enforce our laws, have heard the call of employers who want a high-skilled workforce, have heard the call of families who simply want to be safe in their homes as they work hard to make our country stronger. And that's why I'm proud to be part of a coalition of House members that introduced a bill similar to the Senate bill, the bipartisan bill, H.R. 15, the Border Security, Economic Opportunity and Immigration Modernization Act, which creates jobs, reduces our deficit, and provides a pathway to citizenship and unites families. Immigration reform will provide significant economic growth, as immigrants will be able to contribute substantially to economic growth, increase wages, and productivity. According to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Senate immigration reform bill would lead to significant economic growth. Over the next decade, comprehensive immigration reform would increase our GDP by 3.3%. That means raising wages for Americans by $470 billion. That means creating an average of 121,000 jobs a year for Americans. Immigration reform also means that immigrants will pay more than $100 billion in additional taxes, including to state and local government to support the services that they've been using all along. It's not fair to our fellow Americans for people who are here without paperwork, illegally, to be using our public services without contributing with their taxes, and yet they support paying taxes. It's rare to meet people in this country who want to pay taxes, but to a person that I've met with, they're ready. They're ready. They're patriotic. They're ready to contribute to our country, if only we'll let them. The bill also expands the number of H-1B visas from 65,000 to 110,000 and allows the cap to rise as high as 180,000 depending on the U.S. economy to ensure that businesses don't have to compete for oversubscribed visa slots and can access the workers they need so we can grow the next great generation of companies here. Because when a company is hiring in the technology field or a computer programmer, they are going after the person. And if they can't bring the person that they want here to fill that job, they will fill that job in India, they will fill that job in England, they will fill that job in South America. It's a global economy. And as Americans, we want that jobs and that economic productivity here. The House refusal to take up immigration reform has cost this country over $5.3 billion in potential revenue so far. The cost continues to go up every day that we fail to act. One of the issues in the contentious budget discussions about restoring fiscal solvency to our country is how we can repair our entitlement programs, make them secure for the next generation of retirees. Take the solvency of Social Security Trust Fund, for example. The Social Security Trust Fund is already paying out more in retirement benefits than it receives in taxes, and from an actuarial perspective, that's scheduled to get worse as baby boomers age. But as the Social Security Administration estimates, close to two-thirds of the 8 million people who are here illegally currently work in an underground labor economy where neither their employers or they are declaring their earnings or paying payroll taxes. Imagine that, 8 million more people paying in to Social Security to make sure that it's there for Americans who have worked hard all their lives. We owe that to so many Americans who have paid in, that it is there for them. And comprehensive immigration reform will ensure that that happens. Today, only about 37%, it's been estimated, of people who are here illegally pay into Social Security with payroll taxes. And experts are estimating that our nation loses about $20 billion a year in payroll taxes. I want that number to be 100%. I want people who are working here in this country to pay their fair share to ensure that Americans who've worked hard and paid into Social Security their whole lives are able to retire with the benefits that were promised to them and that they planned their lives around. While people who are here illegally are already helping to support Social Security to the tune of $12 billion a year, we are foregoing $20 billion a year, which is what it's been estimated they would pay in if only we let them. If we can provide a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people who are here illegally, they will contribute hundreds of billions of dollars more to our Social Security system. $606 billion over the next 36 years. That funds a lifetime of retirement benefits for almost 2.5 million Americans. Just from those, we're not talking about letting new people into the country. We're not talking about changing the way that people get here. We're talking about people who are already here and working. We're just saying pay your taxes. Pay your taxes like other Americans do. Let's talk about health care costs. While people here illegally pay into some of the health care programs to the tune of $115 billion for Medicare, again, we're foregoing revenue, and health care costs will continue to rise for American families because of the cost of the uninsured. As the Center for Immigration Studies estimates, the current cost of treating uninsured immigrants who enter this country without documentation is $4.3 billion a year, mostly at emergency rooms and free clinics. So again, costs are being shifted to American citizens to pay for the health care of those who are here illegally. And the answer is simple. Make them pay for it themselves. H.R. 15 does that. Let's bring it to the floor. How much longer must we continue to subsidize the health care for people who haven't even followed our laws in working in our country? If we can pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill that brings our underground economy out of the shadows, many of these immigrants, some of whom have been here for decades, who are currently receiving benefits without paying for them, will be required to pay for their benefits. They'll be required to purchase health care or get insured through their employer. In doing so, our labor market will be healthier, more productive, and generate economic growth. the people who are here illegally will no longer be able to undermine wages for American workers because they're willing to work under the table without paying taxes and taking public benefits from others rather than paying for it themselves. And that's why it's time to pass H.R. 15. There's only 10 legislative days left in 2013 for the House of Representatives to pass immigration reform. The thousands of men and women across the country who are fasting should send a strong message to this body. We need to ask immediately to pass comprehensive immigration reform that provides a pathway to citizenship and helps rebuild our economy. The average work week is an example of many of the hardworking immigrants in our country. On the farm worker side is 53 hours a week. The average wage of a non-citizen worker is $318 a week. Until we can find a way to bring the underground economy out from the shadows, illegal immigration will continue to exert a downward pressure on wages for American workers, reward businesses that skirt the law, that hire people illegally, and provide a drag on our overall economy and job creation. There's no other bill that I know of that will create over 100,000 jobs for Americans, reduce our deficit by close to $200 billion, improve our national security and decrease the terrorist risk to our homeland, and unite hardworking families. And immigration reform will do that. The economic case is compelling. We've gone through some of the numbers here tonight. The security case is compelling in terms of making sure that people in our country cooperate with law enforcement and investigations, that we know who's here and they're accountable for following our laws. The moral case for immigration reform is what is driving this to national prominence. Moral issues always trump our day-to-day concerns. When something is right or wrong, Americans know that. They know that in their minds. They feel it in their heart. And Americans are good people, Mr. Speaker. And they want a country, they want to live in a country and be part of a country that reflects their values as Americans. And Americans know that the way we handle immigration today doesn't do that. It's not moral to take a hardworking mother, plays a critical role with a job supporting her family, away from her American children and put her in indefinite detention. It's not right to allow thousands of people to die at our border rather than secure it and not let people who shouldn't be here through. It's not right to force millions of people to live amongst us in a secret and underground manner, risking exploitation, risking being found out at any turn. That's why, Mr. Speaker, the faith-based community, from the Evangelical Coalition for Immigration Reform to the Catholic bishops to the Jews and Muslims to non-believers, have all joined together, not just to support immigration reform, but to be the strong moral voice for comprehensive immigration reform. It's simply the right thing to do by our people for our values. We are a nation of laws and we're a nation of immigrants. And we need those two to be consistent. We need to reflect our American values as a nation of immigrants in our laws that welcome those who want to work hard and play by the rules to our shores. And yet, today, we have people who have worked hard every day for years, for decades, who have American kids who've gone through our schools and are as American as you and I, and are, while their parents or their uncles or their aunts are still forced to live underground and in secrecy, despite being American in fact, They are not yet American in word. And again, there is no pathway, there is no line for people to get right with the law. Many people face what's called a lifetime bar, meaning that if they even tried to come forward, they would have to live in some other country they might not have even been to for decades and don't have a job and don't have any family and very likely might never be able to return to where their kids are. You can't, when you ask that of people, they're not going to self-deport. That's not a good deal. What parent is going to want to leave their kids for the rest of their life and go to a country that they haven't been in for decades and don't have a job and might not even have family or friends? It just doesn't meet the real-life needs of people in our country. What does is making sure that we hold people accountable for following our laws. Let's create a provisional status, eventually that they can earn a green card. It's also important to know that H.R. 15 and the Senate bill don't grant citizenship to anybody. There's nobody who's granted citizenship under any of these immigration reform bills we're talking about. It's about creating the line, creating the pathway, creating the way that people can get behind, in line, those who are already in line, a minimum of 13 years before they're even eligible to take the test or become a citizen. I've had the opportunity in Estes Park and in Centennial, Colorado, to be at these the new citizenship ceremonies where we administer the oath of citizenship to new Americans from across the world. It gives me great pride as an American, as the great-grandchild of immigrants, as a member of Congress, to be able to participate in welcoming people from Holland, from Kenya, from Israel, from Brazil, from Mexico, to name a few of the many countries that are represented at the two ceremonies that I got to be a part of. And there are many more that would like to work hard beside their American brothers and sisters to make our country stronger. Through acting on immigration reform, we can create jobs, reduce our deficit, improve our security, and most importantly, reflect what we know to be right and our values as Americans. I've been speaking every week on the floor of the House since the passage of the Senate Immigration Reform Bill about the need, since we introduced the House Immigration Reform Bill, about the need to pass immigration reform on the House. I believe we have the votes, Mr. Speaker. I believe if H.R. 15, which has strong bipartisan sponsorship, if it was placed on the floor of the House, I'm confident it would pass. I'm confident the Senate would accept the improvements that the House has made to the border security provisions. We've moved to an outcome-based model, the whole border security accountable. And I'm confident President Obama would sign that bill. There's 2 more weeks, Mr. Speaker, here, 2 more legislative weeks, 8 more legislative days. I think America would like to see Congress work a little harder here. We have 40-some days left in the year. Most Americans have to work more than 8 days out of 40. I think Americans would like to see us work 10 days, 12 days. I mean, God forbid, 25 or 30 days out of 40. That's what most Americans do. And if we do that, Mr. Speaker, I know that we can pass immigration reform. Whether it takes a day, a week, a month, we owe it to our country to try. I've been disappointed to see the types of bills that we've been spending days debating here on the floor of the House these last few weeks. And while these are, of course, issues that people care about, last week we talked about asbestos torts. This week we talked about BLM fracking regulations, certainly an issue that affects Colorado near and dear to my district. I can tell you that the number of people from my district who have written in or called in on immigration reform has been, I think, 100 times. We looked at, we were talking about asbestos reform last week. I didn't have a single constituent who had called in saying what I really want is Congress to tackle asbestos reform. I mean, I hadn't had one in the years I had been here saying that this was the issue they wanted us to deal with. Fracking, frankly, my constituents have asked me to take action on, but it's not the action that the House considered with the BLM. It's more like the bill that I sponsored, the BREATHE Act, which we offered as an amendment and was not allowed in the Rules Committee. But even that, even though my district is home to fracking issues and BLM lands, the number of letters and calls we've gotten to act on that issue is dwarfed by the overwhelming demand for immigration reform. There's never been an issue like it in the public's desire and passion for Congress to act. It's an issue that our municipal governments can't fix, our state governments can't fix. Only our federal government can secure our borders. Only our federal government can require workplace enforcement. Only our federal government can determine who's here legally and who's here illegally. These are not things that cities or states can do. With a void of federal leadership, states are around the edges trying to do what they can. They're talking about in-state tuition. They're working with deferred action kids. The President has moved forward with the deferred action programs that provides at least a 2-year respite for young de facto Americans who know no other country. But only Congress, only the lawmakers can address this issue and actually replace our broken, immoral, nonsensical immigration system with one that works and is enforced to restore the rule of law to our nation. And this problem won't go away until Congress acts. It won't resolve itself. We can wait. We could wait. In 5 years, maybe there'll be 14 million people here illegally instead of 10. Maybe there'll be a whole new generation of people that are here working illegally because we refuse to enforce the laws, refuse to require that employers verify that people who work at their companies are here legally. We don't do that in this country. I mean, Americans might say, oh, why don't employers are not, we have a program. It's an optional program. So guess what? Most employers don't do E-Verify. Why, you know, you're an employer, why would you do it if it's optional? So we think under 10% of companies use E-Verify. Now, we need to make it easier to use so it's not a burden on small business, but we need to make employment verification required, which H.R. 15 does. I mean, if we're ever going to get serious about ending the demand side of illegal immigration, which is people coming here for jobs. If they can't get the jobs, they're not going to be here. And we need to be serious about that. H.R. 15 does that. We need to be serious about securing our border. Now, another important thing for Americans to know is that securing our border is very important, but it's only about half of the issue. About half the people who are here illegally came legally and stayed and worked illegally. So locking down that border, absolutely, and you're never going to have 100%, but 99.9, whatever you get down there, that can reduce illegal immigration by about half. But the other half came here illegally, meaning they were on a student visa and then they stayed illegally and worked illegally, or they flew on a tourist visa, they stayed and worked illegally. There's a number of different ways where it's perfectly legal to arrive here, but then they stay illegally. And so we have to deal with both sides of that. Which is why border security is great, it's important, but it's not enough. It doesn't, at the best cases, it reduces the number of people who enter our country illegally by about half. Doesn't do a darn thing about the fact there's 11 million people here already illegally. Doesn't do a darn thing about the people who will keep entering illegally because they actually enter legally and stay illegally. There's a lot of moving parts to this immigration boondoggle that the country will continue to find itself in until Congress has the courage, the integrity, the desire to act. If there's other ideas, we're happy to hear them. We put H.R. 15 on the table. Many ideas from the Senate bill. I know there's a number of bills that have passed out of Judiciary Committee. There might be a way to bundle some of those together in what's been called piecemeal reform, if there's a way that we can create a holistic system that works. But if there is a piecemeal approach, Mr. Speaker, we need to start having a meal of the pieces and seeing what the pieces are. I was in the software and internet industry before I was elected to office, and we used to have a word for products that were much hyped and never delivered upon. We called it vaporware. And I fear that this piecemeal approach could become vaporware if we don't start seeing some action soon. And I hope that if not by the end of the year, God forbid we work more than 8 days out of 40, if we don't see action by the end of the year, I know we're here in January for 3 weeks. What an excellent time to take up immigration reform. Something that I feel can unite this body, the good and proud men and women who make up this body, who care deeply about restoring the rule of law, who care deeply about ensuring that our nation has a prosperous future, reducing our deficit and creating jobs for Americans on both sides of the aisle, which is why more than 2/3 of the Senate joined in a rare bipartisan vote of support for immigration reform and has challenged this House to take similar action. We can do it, Mr. Speaker. We need to schedule the floor time to do that. We need to get the ideas that members from both sides of the aisle have on the table. We think H.R. 15 is an excellent bipartisan vehicle. If the leaders of this body have other solutions, we're happy to talk about them. But the most important thing that the American people already know, and I hope the leadership of this body recognizes about immigration, is it's not an issue that solves itself. It's not an issue that goes away. It's an issue that only becomes more salient year after year that Congress fails to act. I call upon this body to bring forward H.R. 15 and to pass common-sense immigration reform, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Jimmy yields back. Does the gentleman offer a motion to adjourn?
I move the House to now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.